At the beginning of March, the Beatles were in the Bahamas, in the midst of working on their second film. By all accounts, they spent much of their time there stoned, and on the first, John was photographed riding a skateboard. That same day, Ringo and co-stars Victor Spinetti, Roy Kinnear and Eleanor Bron were filming on a schooner.
I had an interview. I think at the end of the interview they said they'd like me to do it. So I was amazed, and I didn't really have a clue what it meant, actually, because we'd been away in America. We didn't know what had been happening in England, so we returned from New York to find photographs of these lads with soup dish haircuts leaping down the King's Road. I was very shy and only got to know the ripening significance as that time went on. It was as if you'd touched gold. It was like you'd been in the presence of Midas, and somehow you were glorified, but also you become a bit infectious in some strange way. It was very much reflected light, I must say. So people thought it was astounding, and it was astounding actually, but it's been a feature of my life that I've never known until a long time later just how astounding things were.
Undoubtedly by the fact that, and I never really alluded to this until now when I think it doesn't matter at all, but that an awful lot of pot smoking was being done.
John did once offer me a joint, and I obligingly tried to take a little puff. I knew there was some special way of doing it, but I don't smoke anyway. So I took a little puff, and then I thought, this is so expensive, I mustn't waste it, and gave it back to him. So that's your definition of naive, I think.
Right, well, of course, the next film, Help, was a little different because there was a lot of money involved. And suddenly, what happened was we arrived in the Bahamas, in Nassau, and we got off the plane, and we were all standing in this shed, and this car came, vroom, took the Beatles away, and then the car came, vroom, took the director away, and the directors, because at that time, you see, then the car came and took the producer away, vroom, and so all these people now wanted to be involved, so they had to bring their wives, their aunts, their cousins, so every car was full of a director with their families, right? And then finally this old bus turned up, with no windows, and me and Roy Kinnear, and what was his name, the guy who played the... Anyway, the three of us. Patrick Cargill, yeah. Three of us got on this rackety old bus, and then we had to wait for the camera crew because they had to get in as well. We were the last one. Then we got to this hotel, and we all had to share a room because all our rooms had been taken by the families. But not the Beatles, I mean the people. So then I said I played hell. I bloody played hell. I said, listen, you bastards, we're going to be up in the morning to go to work, right? We're not here on holiday to sit by the pool and say, there's John Lennon or there's, we're there to work with them. So I rang up my agent in London and said, I'm pissing off and I'm not stopping you. So the call went through to the high office, and suddenly a big limo arrived, and Roy, myself and Patrick were all taken to the hotel and put up properly. And of course the Beatles didn't know about this, but they did when I told them. In fact, they loved it because, you see, we were there to work. But when we were on that boat, the first shot of that film ever, was I'm coming out of the cabin. There's sand in the generator, and Roy's there, and Ringo's strapped to this board, and I'm about to go and cut his finger off to get the ring. Right? And as suddenly Eleanor Bron turns up and frees what he's doing off the film, but Ringo then dives from the yacht into the water. Well, there were shark nets all around, and there were people looking out for sharks, swimmer frogmen waiting. It was cold, the water's always good, the Atlantic. No, it wasn't. Yeah, it was. Yeah. And so Ringo, they all got him out on board and put him back on the yacht, and he stood there shivering like this, and then they got the hairdryers, and then they changed his clothes, and then they said, and the camera crew and Dick were on the yacht, like as far away as the end of this room, right? Further even. Right? Okay, action. And he said, we'll have to go again. He said, action. No, he didn't say that, not then. Action. He went, and he went, in the water again. Then they dragged him out, all wet, dripping, and he sat there, and he said, do I have to do it again, Nick? I said, why? He said, well, I can't swim. That would have been the end of the Beatles, of that group. So I said, why didn't you say? He said, well, when the director shouts action, you have to do it, you know. So I shouted, he can't swim! Well, I could see them turning white from the distance where I was. I said, okay, won't do anymore, because he could have gone at that moment. He just went, and we had to, the thing is, we were miles off coast, you see, because on the land there were all these people screaming and shouting.
Well, now, yesterday, you were on a schooner, and you dove off, and you said that there was some kind of a mishap yesterday. Are they going to leave that mishap in the film?
No, there was no mishap when I dove off. It was just another part of the film with Roy Kinnear and Victor Spinetti in a little motor launch, and they sort of hit the ship. But they may leave her in, I don't know. Nothing happened when I jumped in.
On March 2nd, a catastrophic avalanche killed 15 people and injured many more in Austria. The avalanche was just a few minutes' drive from the hotel that the Beatles would be checking into in less than 2 weeks' time. Meanwhile, over in the Bahamas, from March 2nd through March 4th, filming continued on Cabbage Beach at Paradise Island and Victoria Beach on Rose Island. On the 2nd, they were interviewed by Dave Hull.
John, I have a couple of questions. You made a statement which I understand was more a put-on than anything else. I thought at the time it was a John Lennon put-on, but most of the American press were not aware of your talent of kidding. And that was when you, at the marriage of Ringo and Maureen, when you and your wife drove up in your Rolls, and you said that George had driven over on his bicycle. Now, you were putting on the world, weren't you?
Yeah. Did that get round? I didn't know.
Oh, yes, it was made press all across the nation. Everybody was saying, well, which was the Beatle that arrived on the bicycle? But he really didn't, did he?
No, it was just a joke. He came with me in the Rolls. We just said it to a friend of ours, Maureen Cleave, on the phone, and we thought she'd know, but it was so early in the morning, so she probably didn't think. She just wrote it down, and I forgot to apologise to her if it's got around the world.
Well, it was a surprise to everyone, Ringo's marriage. I know it wasn't a surprise to the Beatles, because I knew for some time that he's been very much in love with her. How long was it before they really got married? Did they plan on, actually, the marriage date?
Oh, I haven't a clue, you know. I knew there was something in the air, but I went on holiday, so I was way out of touch. Nobody was in touch. I just got back, and he suddenly said, well, the date is in 2 days' time. I said, right, you know. It was quite a shock to us, too, because we knew he was going to get married, but not exactly when.
Well, I don't want to bug you anymore. I know you want to relax for a second, but thank you so much, John, for speaking with me.
While the Beatles were in the Bahamas, Brian Epstein was back in London, and he announced that plans for the Beatles' July concert in Paris, to be televised across Europe, had been cancelled. Instead, a camera team would be filming their performance at Shea Stadium in New York in August. He also confirmed that the plan for John to release a spoken word album of extracts from In His Own Right had now been abandoned.
Comes up, it's got 10 arms on it. What has this got to do with the movie at all?
This is Kali, the sort of the god, and this is the, I don't know, it's the sacrificial god or something. It's a bit past me, you see. It's too involved. I'll wait till they finish making the film and go and see it, and then I'll know what's happening.
How come it has to be a one-shot take? Can't they do this more than once?
No, this thing's 20 foot high, and it's taken them 2 hours to submerge it under the water. And so, I mean, they can do it again, but they'll have to wait for another 2 hours until they can get the thing down on the bottom again. You know, it's a lot of work, so if they can do it in one take, it saves a lot of time. And
well, you haven't made a title tune yet, because there has been no title, but you came up with a great title in your ramblings and looking for titles for the movie, in Who's Been Sitting in My Porridge?
Sleeping. Who's been sleeping in my porridge?
Is that it? Who's Been Sleeping in My Porridge? But that seems like an awfully hard title tune to do, is it?
Yeah, it is. In fact, you know, that is more, I mean, we think it's quite funny, but I mean, when you get down to it, I think it's a bit way out.
Well, you can't certainly do a record called Beatles 2.
Oh no, well they only put that on the front of the script just so that everybody knows that it's our second film. I mean, the Hard Day's Night script had The Beatles written on the front. Now that's just so that everybody knows that it's the script from our film.
I see.
Because you can't just leave it blank because we haven't got a title yet.
There was a rumor that the title might be Bahama Ball. Is that just more or less a...
Bahama Ball?
Yeah.
No, I've never heard that one, but, that won't be it. Because this is only the very end of the film anyway, the Bahamas.
Hi, Ringo. I notice you're wearing a very becoming suit splotched with red. Is that something new, or is that part of the movie?
It's part of the movie. I don't think I'd walk around in a splotchy red suit.
How many suits have you ruined?
3 up to now. 3. Yes, this is the 3rd.
You were staked down out there for these different scenes. Is it rather hot out there?
Yeah, it's very hot, especially when you're staked up.
Now, the other day you were shooting a scene in downtown Nassau. Yeah. And they had blocked off the traffic, I understand, and the Queen Mother was on the island. She went through the set, and I understand you jumped up and said, "Hi, Mom." Are they going to leave that in the film?
No, we didn't. None of us jumped up. None of us knew she came past. And she must have been at least 50 to 75 yards away when she did. We didn't even notice it. So I don't know where you got that story from.
There was a rumor that was going around that...
There's a lot of rumors going around. Yes.
Former press officer Derek Taylor flew to visit the Beatles, and he interviewed them for Los Angeles radio station KRLA.
Testing. This is Derek Taylor sitting in the Bahamas with John, Paul, George, and Ringo. Well, first of all, let me say how nice to see you all again.
How's your wife, Derek?
Fine.
And the kids? Give her all regards.
Father was here.
My dad, yes, he was here just for 2 days after we got in. And he's sunburned, and he's having a good time.
And he's swimming again.
Swimming again for the first time in 40 years, little clinical note. And he's gone back to England now, and he's amidst the snow of Liverpool. It's snowing like mad in Liverpool,
I can believe it. Was his new daughter there?
Yes.
With him?
Yes.
How old is she?
4 years old. Little girl.
During the time I was with the Beatles, I never ever saw any professional jealousy. If Paul came along with a song, and it became the A side, and John had one which he thought might have been the A, there was never any sort of nonsense or backbiting or jealousy. Paul, for instance, came up with She's a Woman, and I thought it was an A, and other people did, and then John came up with I Feel Fine. So Paul's She's a Woman went on the back. Did you mind?
I didn't mind at all. In fact, I wouldn't have liked it to have been an A. As it happened afterwards, it was quite well received, but a lot of people just thought I was singing too high. They thought I'd picked the wrong key.
It's probably less commercial anyway.
Yes, it might have been. I don't know. You get those people who come up and say, why did you sing it that high? You should have sung it in a lower key. Because it sounded like I was screeching it. But ladies and gentlemen, that was on purpose, honest. And it wasn't a mistake, honest.
Maureen Cleave, who was a London journalist, had a very good line in a piece on this disc when she wrote, "How can a dirty, great voice like that come out of such a face?" I think it's often surprising that with a face like yours, a sort of angelic face, the face of a delinquent choir boy, somebody once said, that you have actually got many voices. One of them, what you might call a coloured voice. That was your coloured voice, and She's a Woman, wasn't it?
Yeah, my green voice, that.
What would you call your "And I Love Her" voice?
I don't know. Soppy, I suppose.
John Lennon in dark glasses, white trousers, blue plimsolls, black socks, lilac shirt, a multicoloured jacket. And it's lovely to see you again, John, after about 3 months.
Great to see you, Derek, in your grey shirt, blue tie, grey trousers of a tweedy thingy, Beatle boots and black socks.
They're not Beatle boots.
They will be to anybody who's seen you in the States, Derek.
Operation presumably is to get a different sort of film from Hard Day's Night.
Yeah, and we've done it, haven't we?
Well, by the look of the set you have, sitting on the beach in holes in the sand, a lot of people in khaki uniforms, red sashes and red turbans. Some of them are carrying guns and some of them are carrying shovels. Over by the water's edge, Leo McKern, the British actor, standing looking like a Polynesian high priest. And the whole scene is pretty wild. John hasn't been doing too much this morning. I presume he got up later than Ringo.
Yeah, Ringo got up about 7. I got up at 9, which is late on a film. It's early for me.
How do you come to terms with getting up so early when normally you're late risers and late to bed?
Well, we just sort of go to bed about 12 every night. We just go out at 6 and pretend it's 11 at night and come in at 12, see.
And then, for all we know, we may start on our 3rd film after the American trip, in which case, it will be quite a hectic year.
I noticed that. You seem to be doing 2 films in 1 year.
Well, we're trying to. I hope so, because we enjoy it so much more than anything else.
You prefer filming?
Yeah, it's great. And when the film's finished, you get more sort of satisfaction from it. You feel as though you've done something worthwhile, more so than a tour. Well,
how would
just
you
lately,
say spend a Sunday off?
Well, a Sunday, I'd just have a lie-in, I suppose, and then...
But you're a great sleeper, a sleep worshipper, really.
Well, yeah, but I do like getting up, if I can. It's just trying to get up.
Yeah, it's the move, the break.
I know, since I got my house, I used to just sort of lie around in the back garden last summer when it was quite hot. But now, as it's sort of freezing cold in England, and on a Sunday I just get up, have a late breakfast, which is about 12 o'clock.
Have you got help in the house?
Yeah, I've got a woman who comes in each day and she cooks dinner for me and keeps the place tidy.
What time do you have to get up in the morning, Ring?
Well, Malcolm woke me up at 25 to 7 this morning.
Malcolm's in the film himself, I think.
Yes, that's right. He's a swimmer, a cross-channel swimmer, but he keeps getting lost.
I should explain that Malcolm is Malcolm Evans, who's been the Beatles road manager for many years since he was employed at the Cabin, the club where the Beatles had their dramatic start in Liverpool. Malcolm's a massive man and a handy man to have around. He's sitting down below with Eleanor Bron. Eleanor Bron is a pretty good actress too, isn't she, Ringo?
Yeah, she's marvellous, fantastic.
What was her background in England before she started in this film, do you know?
I don't know too much about it. She was sort of in satirical groups a lot, and she used to do a show on the English TV called Not So Much a Programme, More of a Way of Life, and then here she is with us now.
Over the next few days, filming in the Bahamas continued. March 5th saw location shooting at Cabbage Beach, Victoria Beach, and the French Cloisters, with John, Paul and George shouting for Ringo. On March 6th, shooting was held at Nassau International Airport, where the Beatles were seen photographing each other. On March 7th and 8th, the group filmed a sequence at a deserted army camp. At some point in the first week of March, Murray the K arrived in the Bahamas, and he and Fred Robbins of Radio Luxembourg interviewed the group.
Broadcasting from an abandoned warehouse, which is another scene, and we're on the set. You probably hear noises outside of from where George Harrison and Murray the K are talking right now. George, had a lot of fun last night. It was all happening. Oh, yeah. You mean with the records and things? Yeah. Well, I wanted to say this, but in all the times, and I say this, I wouldn't have to say anything about it. I'm not going to mention any of the song titles as promised, but I want to say that I have never heard better songs with greater recording as far as the singing is concerned and better instrumental arrangements than the records I heard last night. And I really was very thrilled with it. I really thought that it, without a doubt, has got to be a very, very tremendous recording session for you fellas. I heard 9 songs last night. Yeah, well, we did 11 altogether just a week before we left England. Glad you like them, anyway. Oh, they're really something. Now, I want to say this to you. I want to congratulate you. You wrote a couple of songs there, and I won't mention the title, naturally, but you wrote 2 songs there, of which I think got to be big hits, and one I feel could be a #1 record. Now, you wrote one other song, didn't you, in an album, or 2 others? Not around to write it anymore, but suddenly I thought I shall try and write one for this film. So I wrote one, then suddenly I'd written another one as well, so we recorded those the other week before we left for Nassau, and they turned out not bad. Oh boy, you should be proud of them. I love them. I know a couple of people who have heard them, those in the inner circle have really flipped. You got that reaction from other than me, haven't you? Well, we're all pleased with them, and our recording managers and the director of the film, he likes the songs, so we just hope that everybody else will like them.
Right, I was trying to describe the game, word association game that we were playing last night, but you can't tell them the words you said on this, can you? Oh, yeah, I mean, not... How you said it, Maurice. Tell it like it is, baby. Tell it like it is. I can't tell it like it is, Ringo. I can't tell it like it is. But we can do it the way, we did last night with knives. No, the association where you say 1, 2, I know. What are you talking? That game. You changed it, though. I thought you were going to play your game. No, I couldn't play my game last night. I mean, I could just tell you about it.
Have you really gotten used not to be able to have a honeymoon, not to be able to go anywhere without anybody's interfering?
Yeah, we're used to it now, We just know, that there's a lot of things we can't do, so, you're bound to get used to them.
What about going out to a movie, for example? Can you ever sneak
we can see movies. We actually, we've been while we've been in Nassau, we went to the movies to see that one, sort of How to Murder Your Wife Without Really Trying or something.
Yeah. Verna Lisi.
Yeah, and Jack Lemmon.
Some dish, isn't she?
Yeah, great. We just sat there, and then just before the end we went out, we weren't bothered at all.
We all liked the idea. It's good, because we know his wife, Maureen, known her for years, and she's great.
One comfortable thing is that he did, as you say, know her for years, and that must be a tremendous problem with a guy who is famous, and more difficult to meet a girl currently and really be able to judge her, whether she is for you because you are who you are.
No, it's pretty easy to do that.
Can you judge it pretty easily?
Yeah, it's so obvious, I mean, it sticks out a mile when there's somebody hanging around who's just there because you're a Beatle.
Yeah. Patty, you've known how long?
About a year. Yeah, a year.
How did you meet her, George?
She was on the last film.
That's right, yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
She's a model. But, she just got a sort of 5-second part in it in Hard Day's Night.
You think you'll make up your mind as quickly as Ringo did?
I don't know. Can't tell yet. I'll let you know, though. Well, I haven't decided yet, and that's all, I'm just carrying on as I am.
The final day of shooting, March 9th, was spent doing pickup shots on Paradise Island. The next day, they flew home, with British Overseas Airways Corp offering a special menu for their flight. They arrived back in London at around 7 a.m. on March 11th. 5 years later, John looked back at his time in the Bahamas.
Thrust on us, And that was the most humiliating experiences, were all those for me, like sitting with the governor of the Bahamas because we were making help and being insulted by these fucking jumped-up middle-class bitches and bastards who would be commenting on our working classness, and our manners. And I was always drunk like the typical, whatever it is, insulting them. I couldn't take it. It would hurt me, so I would go insane, swearing at them and whatever. I'd always do something, that would... I couldn't take it. It was awful, And all that business was awful,
The boys had the rest of March 11th and March 12th free, before flying to Salzburg to continue work on the still untitled second film there. This time, John and Ringo were accompanied by their wives, and George was accompanied by his girlfriend Patty Boyd. Additionally, friend and photographer Robert Freeman was joined by his wife Sunny. With it being a Saturday, it was easier for fans to meet them at the airport, and so they received one of their better send-offs as they flew to Salzburg. They landed in Austria at 11 AM and were greeted by thousands of fans and a few protesters. Students holding up signs that said, "Beatles Go Home." An impromptu press conference was held at a nearby hotel. The group was unable to check into their own hotel due to the recent avalanche.
Auf dem Salzburger Flughafen harrt die Jugend der großen Ereignisse, die da kommen sollen. Es ist zum größten Teil eine langhaarige Jugend und das lässt bereits erraten, was sie hergeführt hat. Der Empfang der Beatles, die in Obertauern Szenen für ihren zweiten Film drehen wollen. Aber nicht nur Anhänger sind da, auch Beatle-Gegner haben sich eingefunden. Die Beatle-Freunde können sich vor Freude kaum erhalten, die Beatle-Gegner treten kaum noch in Erscheinung. Und die 4 Idole aus Liverpool, die angeblich das Gleiche machen, was schon Mozart in Salzburg gemacht hat, nämlich Musik, fühlen sich sofort wie zu Hause, es sei ihnen gegönnt, denn Hetz bleibt Hetz, in England wie in Österreich.
Flughafen Salzburg. Yay, yay, yay! Du nimmst mir den Verstand. 4000 Viertelwüchsige und die Presse stehen in Erwartung. Wasserwerferwaffen und vorsichtshalber 3 Kompanien Bundespolizei, abendländische Ordnung zu bewahren. Demonstrationen, Pfeifkonzert, Beatles Go Home. Unsere Jugend ist doch nicht so schlecht. Zehn Minuten vor Ankunft der Maschine kommt das Ganze in Bewegung. Beatle-Schuhe, Beatle-Frisuren, Beatle-Hosen, Beatle-Bewegungen, Beatle-Mützen und vielleicht sogar Beatle-Gedanken darunter. 14:15 Uhr, die Maschine kreist über der Landebahn. Wer ein Beatle-Herz im Leibe hat, ist nicht mehr zu halten. Sie kommen, sie kommen. Der Wasserwerfer droht und der Oberstleutnant von der Gendarmerie ruft: Ruhe bewahren, alles Ruhe bewahren. Sie sind da. John, George, Paul und Ringo. Fotografen und Presseleute führen den oft geübten Prominententanz auf. 4000 Beatle-Fans sehen das von weitem. Die Beatles selbst werden eiligst ins Hotel abtransportiert. Vor dem Hotel lärmt ein anderer Stoßtrupp der späten Beatle-Verehrung. Eine ältere Dame auf dem Balkon nimmt die Huldigung gern entgegen. Etwas später zeigen sich die Beatles selbst. Hinter Glas an der Sonnenterrasse. Possierliche Fische im Aquarium. Harmlose Äffchen, für die man keine Gitter braucht. Dann gibt es eine Pressekonferenz. Viel Presse, wenig Konferenz. Mehr Lärm dafür.
Paul, George, John and Paul. Au! Ah, Mensch, du!
Ringo, der Schüchterne, gibt eine tiefsinnige Erklärung seiner Vorliebe für taubeneiergroße goldene Ringe. Paul, George und John bieten lautstark beste Beatle-Flachserei. Frage, wie oft gehen Sie zum Friseur? Niemals, er kommt zu uns.
He comes to us.
Weitere Frage, Sie sind jetzt in der Stadt Mozarts. Was halten Sie von Mozart?
How is he?
Wie geht's ihm denn, dem alten Knaben? Wunderbar. Wunderbar, Onkel Lous bewährtes Zauberwort fällt oft an diesem Nachmittag. Grund für diese muntere Blödelei: Die Beatles drehen ihren zweiten Film und einige Aufnahmen dazu sollen in den Salzburger Bergen in Obertauern gemacht werden. Frage, was ist leichter, Skifahren oder singen? Singen. Was würden Sie ausgeben, um sich selbst singen zu hören? 20 Pfennig, nein, 10. John und George, und in der Mitte sitzt übrigens nicht ein fünfter Beatle, sondern trotz der langen Haare handelt es sich hier um ein Mädchen. Eleonora Bron spielt im neuen Beatle-Film die Hauptrolle und die Produzenten tippen darauf, dass man noch viel von ihr hören wird.
Ich glaube, es ist der erste Film, den Sie machen. Das ist gleich ein Film mit den berühmten Beatles. Wie ist das, mit den Beatles einen Film drehen?
Es ist wunderschön, prachtvoll, sehr, sehr, sehr gut. Sie sind sehr nett und sehr geistvoll und reizend, goldig.
Ja, was wird das für ein Film ungefähr? Welche Rolle spielen Sie denn?
Ich bin eine, ich weiß nicht, wie es man sagt, Priestess.
Eine Priesterin.
Priesterin, ja. Und es ist eine Art, wir laufen nach die Beatles, sie haben etwas, das wir wünschen und das wir haben müssen. Und wir laufen den ganzen Film durch die Beatles nach.
Wir, das heißt, es ist irgendeine Sekte oder?
Ja, es ist da, das existiert nicht in Wirklichkeit, aber das ist ein Fantasiestück.
Ja, und ein Fantasiestück, ein lustiges Fantasiestück.
Ja, sehr lustig, ja. Es ist, die sind ganz toll, die Sachen, die sich finden.
Diese Damen gehen nicht gerne vor die Kamera. Drei langhaarigen Mädchen ist es gelungen, je einen Beatle an Land zu ziehen, den Millionen Beatle-Verehrerinnen zum Ärgernis. Sie sind daher nicht für die Öffentlichkeit bestimmt. Keine Bilder bitte. An der Schneebar in Obertauern. Warten. Nicht die alpine Sonne hat die Beatles so entstellt. Das hier sind Skilehrer, die statt der schneescheuen Pilzköpfe im Film über die Pisten wedeln werden. Und was die Wirkung bei Damen angeht, Beatle sein ist noch 100-mal wirkungsvoller als der geschärteste Skilehrerdreh. Die Ersatz-Beatles nehmen jede Ehrung gern entgegen. Die echten Beatles sieht man auch gelegentlich. Sie werden frühmorgens auf irgendein Schneefeld transportiert, wo sich dann, fast unter Ausschuss der Öffentlichkeit, die rätselhafte Handlung des neuen Beatle-Films entwickelt. Spätestens im Sommer soll man den Film dann auch in Deutschland zu sehen bekommen. Und damit nicht zu viel vorweggenommen wird, halten fortan die starken Bewacher des Aufnahmestabs mit eindeutigen Gästen unsere Objektive zu.
They were able to check into their own hotel later that night, and filming would begin the next day, the 14th. In both the Bahamas and Austria, there were two sets of Beatles being filmed. The Beatles and their doubles. Cliff Diggins was double for George, Mick Dillon for Ringo, Peter Cheevers for Paul, and Joe Dunn for John. On the 14th, the Beatles were filmed frolicking in the snow, while their doubles were filmed in a horse-drawn sleigh.
All shouting and screaming. In the middle of this, I thought, well, this is what it's like. This is what it's like to be a Beatle, you know, because I looked a bit like them, and, you know. And then one of the Sparks, I think maybe it was the Chippy, rolled the window down and said, "He's not one of them. He's one of us. He's nothing." And Dick Lester said, "Well, you can double for the good-looking one, Paul McCartney. But first of all," he says, "can you wrestle with a tiger?" I didn't know whether he was being serious or not.
Around this time, a tentative title was announced for the film, 8 Arms to Hold You. On March 15th, the Beatles and their doubles were filmed on ski lifts and the slopes, a sequence that was completed the following day. That following day, the group is seen playing curling, and Mal Evans went above and beyond to film his appearance in the movie.
And then we had Mel, who was their road manager. We saw him swimming towards us. That's the scene where he comes out of the sea.
As the cross-channel swimmer, which is wonderful, actually.
A barracuda or stingray was behind him, and we were yelling him to come quickly as possible, because in a clear sea you could see this black fish behind him.
In the early 60s, that spirit of I can do anything if I want to do it was absolutely endemic.
Who's going to be mad enough, you know, up in the Austrian Alps in the middle of winter, right, to get into this ice-cold water, right, at 6 o'clock in the morning, right, with a pair of swimming trunks on, right? Hey, Mal, do you fancy a gig? You know, and he could, you know, it was like it was dangerous. Hypothermia, they just covered him in like so much grease and whatever, you know, and then when he had to do it again, okay, take 2, oh no.
Filming in the snow continued over the next few days. During their time in Austria, their ski instructor was Australian Olympic cross-country skier Christine Smith, who had recently competed at the Winter Olympics. They also had the assistance of the hotel owner's 22-year-old daughter, Gloria Gigi Mark's translation skills. Gigi also happened to be the reigning Miss Austria winner. On the 18th, Paul ducked out to shop at the local village. On one of the final nights in Austria, John, Paul, George and Dick Lester gave an impromptu performance on stage. Scheduled to play at the hotel that the film crew were staying were Berlin-based Jacky and the Strangers, led by Jacky Spelter. The Beatles knew Spelter from Hamburg, where they both played in the early 1960s. Apparently, Jacky invited John and Paul on stage to join them. John played Jacky's guitar while Paul played drums. According to the keyboard player in Jacky's band, they didn't play any Beatles songs, but they did rock and roll oldies.
We were filming in a bowl where there were 3 or 4 resort hotels. We were all staying in one of the larger ones, and it had a sort of beer cellar, which had a resident 3-piece band. And my assistant director, a man called Clive Reed, had a birthday. The band played for a while, and then we turfed them off and said, "That's fine, goodbye." And Paul got onto drums, and I went onto the piano, and John and George took turns. And it just started, and I hadn't played for some time, and I certainly didn't have their encyclopedic knowledge of all the Buddy Holly songs and that period of rock and roll. But I would sort of stumble along as best I can, pretending that they were 12-bar blues, and I would just sort of thump away and hope nobody would hear. But it just kept going, and I think we played till about 3 in the morning, at which point we all sort of drunkenly went to bed, and I woke up and my sheets were covered in blood because I hadn't played for so long. But all the tips of my fingers had cracked from the effort, and I was sort of bleeding all over it. But it was one of those great times, and I remember Neil Aspinall saying to me not too long ago, he said, "Do you realize you're probably one of the only musicians in the world that's actually played a full set with the Beatles?"
March 20th was the final day of shooting for the Beatles. They were filmed miming to Ticket to Ride in a variety of outdoor settings, at one point clustered around the piano from their hotel. While they were in Austria, business-related happenings were going on back in England. Hayling Supermarkets Limited was incorporated to control a supermarket on Hayling Island. It was to be run by John's old school friend, Pete Shotton, and the directors would be Shotton, John, and George Harrison.
Upon my return to Liverpool, I rang up John's accountants, told them about the supermarket, and asked them to check the place out. A few days later, they returned the verdict that it was a fine business and that John and I could hardly hope for a better investment. The upshot was that by Easter 1965, I was already launched on my unanticipated new career, running a supermarket on a little island that I hadn't even heard of 4 months earlier. One of the best things about Hayling Island, from my standpoint, was that it was less than an hour's drive from Weybridge. For the next several years, I was to spend almost all of my free weekends staying with John.
The Beatles flew home to London on March 22nd, where filming would continue at Twickenham Film Studios. They generally worked from 8:30 a.m. till 5:30 p.m. That weekend, they had a couple of days off filming, and according to Robert Rodriguez, it was on March 27th that John, George, Paddy and Cynthia headed to George and Paddy's dentist's place for some drinks before planning to head to the Pickwick Club to see Klaus Voormann and his new band perform there.
Well, I had a dentist anyway. One night, John and his wife Cynthia and Patty and myself were having dinner at this guy's house. Now, this fella, for some reason or other, had obtained lysergic acid diethylamide 25, which at that time was it was not illegal. It was a legally obtained medication. But we didn't really know about it. I seem to recall that I'd heard vaguely about it, but I didn't really know what it was.
Do you recall that evening in any great detail? Because, of course, you experienced it in a way you weren't expecting.
Yes, it was the most extraordinary occasion. John, Cynthia, George and I were invited to our dentist for dinner.
Why was that? I mean, people don't normally go to their dentist for dinner. Was he a friend anyway, this man, John Lennon?
He was desperate to be our friend.
I see.
So we were really polite and said, all right, we'll come for dinner. So we went, and it was a very nice dinner, and we were about to leave, and his wife said, no, you haven't had coffee yet. So we sat down, had the coffee, and then we went into their sitting room, and John said, we've got to go now, because we want to go and see Klaus Voormann playing somewhere. And the dad said, no, you can't leave. Why not? Well, you've just had LSD. It meant nothing to me or George. John was absolutely furious because he knew about it, or he'd read about it or heard about it.
Yeah.
He's furious. So he ate a few expletives and we left.
Right. Ironically, though, because John had a history of slipping drugs into other people's drinks. And he'd been doing that for some years, yes, he had. Ever since they first came back with Prellies from Hamburg, he'd been slipping drugs to people.
The dentist?
No, John Lennon had.
Oh, I see.
John Lennon had. So now, yeah, too many Johns in this story. So now John is on Lennon is on the receiving end of it, and he was upset about it, was he?
Yeah, he was very angry.
Right.
Because this is a drug that's so strong.
And he just put it in our coffee or something, yeah. And we went, he was saying, I advise you not to go. He didn't know what it was. There was just a sort of, it's all the thing, with the sort of the middle class London swingers or whatever. I hadn't all heard about it, and they didn't know it was different from pot or pills. And they gave us it, and he was saying, I advise you not to leave. And we thought he was all trying to keep us for an orgy in his house, and we didn't want to know,
It became like a bit seedy to me. It looked like he was trying to, get something happening in his house. There was some reason he didn't want us to go. And then he was saying, okay, leave your car here. I'll drive you. And then you can come back later. I said, no, we'll go. And we got in my car and we drove. And this guy came as well in his car. We got to the nightclub.
It lasts for up to 8 hours where you just don't feel normal at all. I actually started to think this is it. This will be me for the rest of my life.
Yes.
Because we had no idea.
Yeah, yes. Well, you
It's
don't.
very frightening.
Absolutely, yeah. And then I read the book, and of course John Lennon, in his Rolling Stone interview, talked at length about what happened that night and how you went to the Ad Lib Club, I think it was, and to the Pickwick Club. And
Yes, we went to many clubs in London, and this drug is hallucinogenic, so everybody turned into weird animals, and I was just the most bizarre trip.
Frightening.
Really frightening.
Yeah.
It's insane. We got in the lift and we all thought there was a fire in the lift. It was just a little red light and we were all screaming like that. And it was all hysterical. And we all arrived on the floor because this was a discotheque that was up a building. We get, and the lift stops and the door opens and we're all... It
felt like the elevator was on fire and that we were going into hell or something. But we were all in hysterics and like crazy. And then we got out at the top and everything was okay. And I suppose... And we sat there probably for hours and hours. I ended up driving everybody home. It was like daylight. And I was driving this Mini with John and Cynthia and Patty in it. And we were going like, I seem to remember we were doing 18 miles an hour. And I was really concentrating. Because some of the time, it just felt normal, like as though everything was okay. And then before you knew where you were, suddenly it was all crazy.
Anyway, George, eventually we decided to go home, and we lived in Surrey. And it took about, a trip that would normally take about 45 minutes, took about 3 hours. George was driving so slowly.
And he was such a fast driver.
Yes.
Maybe he thought he was going fast.
Yes.
Somehow the next day, Sunday the 28th, John and George were able to recuperate and head to Birmingham to film an appearance on Thank Your Lucky Stars. While performing, the Beatles were swarmed by fans. On Monday, they filmed more interior scenes, including a laboratory scene and interiors for a railway station scene. On March 30th, they returned to St John's Wood after filming, where they spent some time working on That Means a Lot. The next day, March 31st, they recorded interviews for a German language program on Radio Luxembourg.
Endlich haben wir einen erwischt, und zwar George. Wir sitzen in seiner Garderobe. Hello, George.
Hallo, guten Abend.
Sehr schön. Also Sie hören, er spricht Deutsch. Werden wir uns also gleich mal auf Deutsch unterhalten.
Wir haben euch zum letzten Mal in Salzburg gesehen. Wie hat es euch da gefallen?
Nicht so schlecht. It's okay. You mean, how was it in Salzburg? Yeah, well, it was fine, but the only thing is, with working every day and getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning, 7 Uhr früh, ist nicht gut.
Sind Sie selbst Ski gefahren?
Kein bisschen nur.
War es schwer, ja?
Ja.
Ja. Und Sie sind auch oft hingefallen?
Yeah.
Skifahren, ja?
But they can't. The film company says that we can't ski because if we break a leg, then we can't. We'd have to stop filming until it was better.
Wie viel kostet ein Beatles-Bein? How much does it cost a leg?
Das weiß ich nicht.
Haben Sie ein festes Double?
Festes Double?
Stand-in. A stand is always stand-in.
Yeah.
Always the same.
There's all, yeah.
Und der reist immer mit rum?
No. In Austria, im Österreich, haben wir anderen whatever it is.
Andere Doubles gehabt, ja.
Und
was ist Ihr Hobby? Was tun Sie privat sehr gern, außer Musik machen?
Ja, immer Gitarre.
Ja?
Und Schallplatten spielen, lesen und ins Kino. Gestern Abend haben wir einen guten Film gesehen.
Was war denn das für einer?
Ibcrest File. It's a New English.
Könnt ihr es euch überhaupt leisten, einmal inkognito, unerkannt, irgendwo zum Beispiel ins Kino zu gehen?
Nein, wir haben Privatkino.
Ja, ja. Und gehen Sie schon mal ganz alleine, ohne...
Nur uns. Gestern Abend, wir haben nur uns und unsere Filmproducer und seine Frau. Nur 6 oder 7
Aber ich meine,
Leute.
Ist es möglich, dass mal einer von euch vielleicht mit einer Mütze auf alleine durch London spaziert?
Ganz alleine.
Habt ihr das jemals versucht?
Vielleicht, aber...
You ever tried it?
Paul has mit Schnurrbart.
Und ist er erkannt worden?
Für eine halbe Stunde. Er war in ein großes Geschäft, Harrods. Und die Mädchen haben ihn, they realized, what's the word?
Sie haben ihn erkannt.
Ja.
Und dann musste er flüchten, ja.
But it's embarrassing, do you know, the word embarrassing. When, if you go with a beard and the people see that it's you with a beard, then it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
John and I went through London Airport with glasses and beard and hats and coats, and as we walked through, people say, "Hello, George. Hello, John." And we're all embarrassed. It's awful. So it's better to go like this and just run.
Hier sind die 3 fröhlichen Wellen von Radio Luxemburg. Am Mikrofon Ihr George von den Beatles. Und Sie hören nun unsere neue Schallplatten. Guten Abend.
Vielleicht kannst du noch irgendein deutsches Lied singen.
Vielleicht.
Ein deutsches Volkslied.
Aber nur vielleicht. Am Sonntag will mein Süßer mit mir segeln gehen. Nur wenn des Windes wehen. That's all I know.
Sehr schön.
Ich würde vorschlagen, er sagt doch den neuen Beatles-Titel an. Die neue Platte.
Ja, die hat eine neue Aufnahme auf.
Ja, es heißt Ticket to Ride. Fahrscheine zu fahren.
Das weiter mit einem Da Capo für die Beatles. Meine lieben Zuhörer, falls Sie sich ein bisschen später eingeschaltet haben und nicht so genau wissen, na, wer redet denn da so in gebrochenem Deutsch und in Englisch, das wird doch nicht. Doch, es sind wirklich die Beatles. Inzwischen sind wir eine Garderobe weitergerutscht und sitzen bei John. Hello, John.
Hallo, guten Abend. Ah ja, John spricht ja Deutsch. Ich glaube, wir können auf Deutsch interviewen.
Nein, ich spreche nur ein bisschen.
Ja, aber schon ganz gut.
Ja, zunächst einmal über den Film, würde ich sagen. Macht es Spaß zu filmen? Spaß.
Fun.
Do you like it?
I don't know that word. Yes, I like it. Ich liebe ich. No, that's wrong. I like it, yes.
Aber es ist sehr anstrengend, nicht?
Anstrengend, good fun.
Is it more strenuous?
Oh, strenuous, oh yes, very anstrengend for me.
Und ich vielleicht auch nach Deutschland führen?
Ja, vielleicht. Wir kommen wieder.
Ja, und da haben wir gleich eine Frage. Wann kommt der nächste Titel in Deutsch gesungen?
Titel?
Ja, also der nächste Schlager.
Sung in German.
What is? Oh, I don't know. That's up to the record company. No, but I think the German people seem to like it in English now.
Ja, er sagt, er weiß
The teenagers like it.
Er weiß noch nicht, wann der nächste Titel auf Deutsch gesungen wird, aber ihm scheint, als ob zumindest die Teenager die Titel auf Englisch gesungen.
In deinen Namen bin ich glücklich und froh.
Sehr gut.
Wir haben ja auch unverschämtes Glück. Eben hörten Sie schon, liebe Hörer, dass im Hintergrund jemand sich einmischte.
Ja, und nun sitzt er hier zwischen uns, nicht?
Oh,
Ja.
Guten Tag.
Guten Tag, Paul.
Guten Tag. Das ist Paul, das können Sie hören. Paul spricht gut Deutsch, ja?
Klein bisschen.
Ja, ein bisschen.
Wenig.
Von den Hamburger Zeiten aus noch?
Ja.
Wie war es in Hamburg?
Gut.
Habt ihr nicht manchmal ein bisschen Heimweh nach Hamburg? Ihr habt doch sehr viel Erfolg da gehabt.
Das ist gut in Hamburg, aber für uns England ist immer besser.
Das ist
weil
die
das
Heimat,
ist
ja.
Heimat, ja.
Mhm.
Aber Deutschland ist gut.
Ja.
Jawohl, mein Herr. Ja, und wann, das haben wir schon mal gefragt, kommt ihr mal wieder nach Deutschland? Wir wissen das nicht. Jetzt.
Ist noch unbestimmt, ja?
Ja.
Und einen deutschen Titel nehmt ihr auch so schnell nicht auf, eine deutsche Platte?
Nein, nein.
Nein.
Aber in jedem Fall, wenn ihr vorläufig oder in den letzten Jahren, das heißt seit der Hamburger Zeit, nicht in Deutschland wart, liegt es an euch, weil ihr nicht wollt, oder einfach daran, dass ihr halt nicht die Gelegenheit gehabt habt?
Aber geboren?
Ja, das war schwer.
Yes, it was a bit
Schwer,
difficult.
yes.
I said,
schwer.
you didn't come to Germany after you left Hamburg for the last time. And what I want to ask for our German Beatle fans, is it your fault, or didn't you like to go to Germany? Is it just because you didn't have the possibility of it?
No, well, unser Manager macht das immer.
Also, aber
ja.
ihr von euch aus würdet nach Deutschland kommen?
Ja, ja, ist gut. Deutschland. Sehr gut.
But there will be a television
Vielleicht
show.
wir kommen, wir wissen das nicht.
Das wäre sehr schön.
Sie waren ja schon im deutschsprachigen Land, in Österreich.
Ja,
Österreich.
ja.
Da war es doch ganz nett,
Obertauern.
ne? Ja.
Ganz nett.
Auch Ski gefahren.
Ja.
Ja. Und hingefallen.
Ja, immer. Immer. Aber es war schön. Wetter. Das Wetter war schön, ja.
Paul, und
Yes.
vielleicht sollten wir uns jetzt damit verabschieden, denn gleich geht draußen die Filmarbeit wieder los.
Weiter,
Die
ja.
Dekorationen sind schon aufgebaut.
Eingeleuchtet.
Eingeleuchtet.
Wir sehen uns die
schon.
nächste Szene noch an.
Wir schauen uns gemeinsam die nächste Szene an. Viel Glück und auch toi, toi, toi. Und vielleicht kannst du zum Schluss noch einen Gruß an die Hörer von Radio Luxemburg sagen.
Ja.
Ja, an alle die Hörer von Radio Luxemburg, viele Grüßen von The Beatles, John, George, Paul und Ringo. Auch Monika, Norbert und Dieter.
Dankeschön.
Danke.
Wiedersehen.
Wiedersehen.